Welcome to the Stoic Golden Tribe, where enduring wisdom meets the strength of presence, and where we uncover the truths modern society refuses to teach men. There's a strange paradox woven deep into the psychology of attraction, something few men understand, but those who do hold the power to captivate women without ever chasing them. It's not in the constant texts, it's not in the validation, and it's certainly not in trying to win her over. In fact, when you stop giving her your attention, when you detach, when you prioritize your mission, your peace, and your presence, that's when she begins to feel your absence. That's when the seed of desire takes root. This video is not about playing games. It's about understanding the emotional intelligence and psychological truth behind a woman's deepest emotional responses wired into her biology and shaped by centuries of courtship, power dynamics, and unspoken signals. We'll explore ancient stories of kings who walked away and queens who followed. We'll break down what happens in her mind when you no longer seek her validation. And most importantly, we'll give you powerful, practical advice that helps you reclaim your masculine presence without losing your compassion or your integrity. This isn't just about women, it's about you, the man who is learning to stop chasing, to grow his value, and to allow attraction to flow naturally, not forcefully. So make sure to like, share, subscribe, and drop a comment if this resonates with you, because this is the kind of truth modern society refuses to teach men. Now let's dive into the power behind your silence and what it really triggers in her heart. Chapter 1. The magnetic power of silence. In a world obsessed with instant replies, constant updates, and 24/7 availability, silence has become one of the most powerful weapons a man can wield. And when it comes to relationships, especially romantic ones, your silence can speak louder than all your words combined. Let's start with a simple truth. Women are emotional beings, and emotion is ignited through contrast. When you are always present, always replying, always available, you become part of the background, predictable, known. And while that might seem comforting, it actually erodes attraction over time. The human mind craves what it cannot fully grasp. It longs for what's just out of reach. And the moment you pull away, not out of manipulation, but out of emotional discipline, you activate that longing in her. Historically, this has always been the case. Consider the tale of Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal, the royal lovers behind the Taj Mahal. When Mumtaz passed away, the emperor withdrew from public life, engulfed in sorrow and silence. That silence created legend. His absence from the world echoed through the empire. His love became immortal, not through constant words, but through the quiet mourning that inspired one of the most iconic love monuments ever built. Now think about your life. When you withdraw your attention, not out of spite, but because you are investing it into yourself, you cause her to feel. She starts to wonder, why has he gone silent? Where is his energy now? That space causes her to reflect, to replay past moments, to reevaluate her position in your world, and that's where emotional impact is born. Many men chase because they're afraid that if they don't text back quickly, she'll lose interest, afraid that if they aren't visible, she'll forget them. But the truth is, your silence is often more attractive than your attention, especially when it's paired with self-respect. Here's where emotional intelligence comes into play. This is not about ghosting, it's not about punishing, that's immature. This is about mastering your emotional responses so you don't become reactive. When she pulls away, you don't panic, you don't beg, you observe, you hold frame, you protect your peace. When a man can stay calm in the face of confusion, his silence becomes dominant, not dismissive. Why does this work? Because it reverses the dynamic. When you stop pursuing, she begins to feel the absence. An absence creates tension. That tension builds emotional gravity. Now you're the one being thought about. You're the one living rent-free in her mind. But this is where most men fall apart. They don't have the internal discipline to stay silent long enough. Their egos need a response. Their wounds need validation. So they break, they text, they chase, and in doing so, they collapse their own value. In ancient Japan, the samurai practiced a concept called fudoshin, an unshakable mind, calm, still, composed in the middle of chaos. A man who possesses Fudoshin doesn't react emotionally. He doesn't beg for attention. He doesn't chase chaos. He observes and waits. This isn't cold. This is powerful. You must learn to hold your ground even when her silence feels uncomfortable. You must understand that women often test your emotional control, not with anger or insults, but with withdrawal. When you respond with presence instead of panic, with silence instead of desperation, you pass the test. And the truth is, when you ignore her, not to hurt her, but to reclaim your presence, you become the question she can't stop asking. The moment you stop chasing, she starts reflecting. The moment you go quiet, her emotions get louder. That's when she wants you most, not because of your attention, but because of your strength to not give it so easily. You're no longer the man trying to win her over. You're the man she now has to win back. Let her sit with the silence. Let her wonder. That space you create, it's the fire that reignites her attraction. Not by force, by presence, by discipline, by letting your silence do the talking. Drop a comment. I attract, not chasing. Chapter 2. The shift in power from pursuer to prize. In every relationship, there's an unspoken dynamic, a flow of energy between the one who gives and the one who receives, the one who pursues and the one who is pursued. And whether you realize it or not, whoever holds their center holds the power. When a man constantly pursues, he unconsciously places the woman on a pedestal. She becomes the prize, and he becomes the chaser. But something remarkable happens when a man stops chasing, not to manipulate, but because he begins to understand his own value. The energy shifts. Suddenly she feels the loss of attention. The silence becomes louder than your words, and that's when you transition from pursuer to prize. Let's take a lesson from history. In the court of Queen Elizabeth I, many noblemen sought her affection, powerful, wealthy, charming men, yet she remained unmarried throughout her reign. Why? Because she understood the psychology of power. She kept men close enough to crave her approval, but distant enough to keep them chasing. Her ability to remain emotionally composed made her the most desired woman in the kingdom, not because of her beauty, but because of her emotional control. Now let's flip the script. When a modern man learns to hold back, not as a strategy, but as a sign of strength, he triggers the same emotional curiosity. He removes himself from the emotional buffet and in doing so becomes scarce. And scarcity creates value. But there's more to it than just disappearing. It's not just the act of ignoring her that matters. It's who you become while doing it. When you shift your focus from her to your mission, your health, your spiritual grounding, your money, your goals, your energy changes. You stop being someone who needs her validation and become someone who has his own direction. This is deeply attractive because feminine energy is drawn to movement. It is drawn to ambition, to purpose, to forward motion. And when a man detaches from chasing a woman and starts chasing his destiny, he becomes magnetic. Here's a painful truth most men need to hear. If your presence doesn't matter to her, then your absence won't either. And in that case, your silence is not a weapon. It's a wake-up call, a call to rebuild yourself, to grow in value so that your presence does matter next time. This isn't about getting her back. This is about getting yourself back. And if she starts to feel your absence and begins reaching out, don't run back instantly. Stay centered. Respond with calm. Show her that your world doesn't revolve around her, but that you're open to connection, as long as it aligns with your peace and direction. That's masculine power. When you ignore her, you create time for her to feel. And in that space, she reflects. She replays old conversations. She remembers how you made her feel. She begins to notice what life is like without your energy in it. The silence becomes a mirror, and she starts to see her own behavior, maybe for the first time. And here's the key. A man who doesn't fear loss becomes irresistible. Why? Because confidence isn't built through attention, it's built through independence. When you show her you don't need her affection to feel whole, she feels your power, and that's when she wants it back. Look at the great Stoic generals of history, men like Cincinnatus of Rome. When offered power, he walked away. Twice. He didn't cling, he didn't beg, he He didn't chase titles or people. He returned to his farm, content in his simplicity. That strength of character, of needing nothing, made him the most respected man in Rome. Women sense when a man is whole. They sense when he is centered, when he no longer dances for their approval, but moves to the beat of his own mission, his own rhythm. And here's the irony: the moment she realizes you're okay without her is the exact moment she wonders if she can have you again. When she no longer feels you pushing, she starts pulling. That's the shift, but it only happens when your silence is not a strategy, but a sign of sovereignty. So don't be afraid to walk away. Don't be afraid to let her feel the absence, because if she truly sees your worth, she'll come to you, not out of pressure, but out of realization. Drop a comment. I am the prize. Chapter 3. Emotional tension, the secret force. Behind desire, desire is not built in comfort. It is born in mystery, in uncertainty, in space. And nothing creates emotional tension more effectively than the silence of a man who knows his value. This chapter is about understanding why tension makes her want you, and how your controlled detachment pulls her in deeper than your words ever could. To begin, let's go back to one of the most famous romantic tensions in history, Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. Cleopatra didn't chase Caesar. She didn't flood him with affection. Instead, she cultivated mystery and timing. She had herself smuggled into his chambers, rolled in a carpet, not as a stunt, but as a calculated move that triggered his curiosity. She understood emotional tension better than any woman of her time. And Caesar, the most powerful man in the world, found himself enchanted. What does that teach us? Attraction is not about giving her everything, it's about creating emotional friction. When you ignore her, not out of spite, but out of calm self-control, you create the tension that attraction needs to grow. You give her room to feel. You remove yourself just enough that her mind starts asking questions, and questions are powerful. Why isn't he texting me anymore? Has he moved on? Did he lose interest? Is he with someone else? That curiosity pulls her in emotionally. Now here's the critical piece. If you ignore her out of anger or bitterness, she feels that. It becomes repellent. But if you withdraw with calm, composed energy, focused on your goals, unbothered, not reactive, she feels the pull. It's the difference between immaturity and mastery. Tension builds because silence gives her space to reflect, and reflection creates emotion. You see, most men chase because they can't sit with the tension themselves. It's too uncomfortable. They feel the silence and panic, so they break. They send that message, they explain themselves, they overcorrect. But emotional tension is not your enemy, it's your ally. When you allow her to feel your absence and you maintain your presence in that silence, she begins to respect you in a new way. Respect leads to reflection. Reflection leads to desire. And that desire doesn't come from your words, it comes from what she feels when you're not around. Let's bring this into a modern example. A man who's constantly texting, double messaging, liking every story, and commenting non-stop. He's predictable. He's emotionally exposed. And over time, that energy becomes stale. She knows she has him. There's no thrill, no mystery, no fire. But when a man goes quiet, because he's busy, because he's working on himself, because he's not dependent on her response, she starts to wonder. And here's what most men don't realize. Women fall in love in the space between moments, not in constant interaction, but in silence, in distance, in the replaying of memories. That's when emotional connection forms. The feminine mind romanticizes absence far more than presence. Now, this doesn't mean disappearing forever. It means having the emotional maturity to step back when needed, to remove your energy when it's not being reciprocated, to not overinvest when she's uncertain, to allow her the space to feel your absence and come toward you on her own. This isn't a trick, it's emotional gravity. And it takes strength, because most men don't trust themselves enough to do it. They fear losing her. They think, if I stop trying, I'll lose her forever. But here's the truth. If your silence makes her forget you, she never valued you. But if your silence makes her remember you, that's when she's truly seeing your worth. So let the tension work. Let her feel it. Let her sit in the uncertainty. Don't try to control the outcome. You are not in this to convince her. You are in this to center yourself. And in doing so, draw the right kind of attention. The man who doesn't chase becomes the mystery. The man who becomes the mystery becomes the desire, because women don't want men who need them. They want men who choose them, men who are whole, composed, and can walk away if they're not being valued. Emotional tension isn't manipulation, it's nature, and those who understand it rise above the noise. Drop a comment. She feels me when I'm silent. Chapter 4. The Return of Power, Leading with Presence, Not Pleasing. Now we arrive at the truth few men are ever taught. The final lesson: ignoring her isn't about withdrawal, it's about reclaiming your power. And once that power returns to you, everything in the dynamic shifts, not just in love, but in life. You begin to operate from strength, not insecurity. From clarity, not confusion. From presence, not performance. Let's begin with a story from history. Napoleon Bonaparte, one of the greatest military leaders in history, had deep romantic affections for his wife, Josephine. In the early days, he chased her, wrote desperate love letters, poured himself out. And Josephine? She didn't reciprocate with the same intensity. She pulled away, delayed her responses, stayed emotionally elusive. Napoleon became consumed. But then something changed. Napoleon shifted focus. He stopped pouring everything into her and redirected that obsession into his mission. He returned to the battlefield, became the man who conquered Europe, and only then did Josephine begin chasing him. What happened? He became powerful again, not because he ignored her out of pettiness, but because he remembered who he was. And that's what every man must do. The moment you stop centering your life around a woman's attention and start centering it around your legacy, your growth, your peace, and your mission, you change everything. Because men who know their purpose are dangerous, not in a toxic way, but in a way that says, I will not be distracted by what isn't for me. I will not shrink myself to keep someone interested. I will not abandon my direction for temporary affection. Now listen closely. Ignoring her only works when your life is something worth returning to. If your silence is empty, she won't feel it. But if your silence is full of movement, growth, elevation, she will feel your absence like a storm passed through, because your value increases when your energy is rare and your mission is rich. Let's break it down in simple terms. When you ignore her, you create space. Space creates mystery. Mystery leads to reflection. Reflection sparks emotion. Emotion brings her back to you if she values who you are, but only if you've built something in that silence: your mindset, your body, your faith, your income, your relationships, your vision. Men who don't use silence to grow fall into the trap of bitter waiting, but men who use it to evolve become kings. And here's where emotional intelligence reaches its peak. You don't ignore her to play games. You don't use silence to cause pain. You use silence to clarify who deserves access to you. When she comes back, and often she will, your response must come from grounded clarity, not wounded ego. Don't brag, don't guilt trip her, don't try to prove anything. Just be still, be calm. Let her feel the energy shift. Let her sense that your presence now has a price, and that price is respect, honesty, and effort. The strongest men are not those who chase affection. They are the ones who walk in quiet strength, knowing that love given freely is never forced, and energy given too easily is never valued. In ancient Sparta, boys were trained from age 7 to become warriors, not just physically, but emotionally. They were taught to endure pain, silence, and loss without breaking down. Why? Because a man who can hold his emotional ground cannot be controlled. And that's what this whole video has been about. You reclaim your power when you no longer panic in the face of silence. You become attractive when you are okay with walking away. You become valuable when your energy is protected. You become a leader, not a pleaser. So if you're being ignored, don't chase. If you feel your worth isn't being seen, don't explain. If she pulls away, let her. And in that space, become so powerful, so whole, so elevated, that the next time she looks for you, she finds a man who is no longer waiting to be chosen, but already living like he was. Drop a comment. My silence speaks louder than words.